Hello, I'm James Preston and welcome to another edition of Executive Corner Expert Talks exclusive to Kalkine TV. The troubles in Victoria by now have been well documented. Whilst COVID-19 is causing problems, the real virus increasingly is that of the Daniel Andrews government, ruling with a hand-over-fist mentality that includes weaponising the police force against citizens, mandating vaccines for millions, and as it now turns out, barring members of Parliament from entering the Victorian chamber. One of those politicians who has been banned from entry into Parliament is Legislative Council Representative Tim Quilty from the Liberal Democrats, and he joins me live now on Kalkine TV. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Hopefully you're hearing me this time.
Tim, got you loud and clear. Now, look, you're one of the members of the Parliament Excellent. In exile at the moment. Can you explain what that is and why you're a part of it?
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, the Andrews government brought in rules to say that all members of Parliament would have to show their vaccine passports in order to participate in the Parliament. It's because they're doing this to everyone else in Victoria as well, they decided to make some special rules for them as well. David and I refused to show our papers because we don't believe in the vaccine. We think it's a gross violation of human rights of Victorians. We're both vaccinated. We could easily show our papers and turn up, but we refused to do that, so we got kicked out of the Parliament. We called it a purge. They kicked MPs out of Parliament, and what's left is a rump Parliament. Last time this happened in a Westminster democracy was back in 1648 when Cromwell purged so he could get a remaining rump that would vote for him, support him being the king, when he went on to become dictator of England. So a shocking thing that they've done. They've upturned hundreds of centuries of parliamentary precedent to do it. But we didn't buckle under it, so we have set up a rebel parliament, or parliament in exile, in a basement in a nightclub in Melbourne. And we've been conducting parliament from here for the last week.
Now, I understand as well that whilst you have got your separate parliament set up there, it now doesn't actually allow you to vote on parliamentary issues. How can that possibly be the case given you are still an elected representative?
Yeah, well, exactly. This is the whole problem with it. Because technically under the Constitution, you can't vote unless you're at the Parliament. And then by passing this rule that barred us from accessing the Parliament, they took our vote away. And right when they were introducing their permanent pandemic legislation power, let's go. Yeah, Andrews the power to extend this state of emergency indefinitely. Or their motion was to get rid of our voices, to get rid of our vote, to make it easier for them to push.
Well, let's touch on that right now, because obviously this is the big talking point at the moment, is the fact that it's pretty intense legislation that's being pushed forward. Typically what we've seen is a state of emergency that just seems to be constantly rolled over despite the current scenario that Victoria is experiencing. This would obviously give somewhat unprecedented powers. We're having people like yourself who can't vote on it. Do you now know what is actually included in it? Because it's been very much a document of secrecy.
Oh, absolutely. They've been working on this bill for months, but they didn't show it to any MP. In fact, the official government line was MPs didn't deserve to see it. We weren't supporting the government, so we had no right to see the legislation. It finally got out this week. It was leaked to the media first, who then passed it on to MPs. So we finally got to see it. Parts of it are not terrible. They've sort of half included the things we've been calling for during the emergency, more transparency, and so on. Revealing the advice for it. But they could have done that anyway without this new legislation. They're making it just indefinite. The Premier, giving all the power to the Premier to make it go on, and using severe penalties. So it'll be up to 2 years in prison for anyone who knowing breaks a mandate. So if you're outside without your mask on and they decide that was a particularly bad, not mask-wearing event, they could throw you in prison for 2 years. It's shocking.
It's crazy stuff, especially when you consider Daniel Andrews was recently, of course, found in public twice without a mask on. I would love to see whether he would also potentially face the wrath of 2 years imprisonment for his own laws. But Well, quite interesting there as well, Tim. I mean, you mentioned that some elements of it are fine, but there's also the subject of potentially a $90,000 fine, for example, of trying to use a fake COVID passport or things like that. Typically as well, I mean, you mentioned there too that you haven't been able to see, you had to get a leaked copy from the media. Usually there's about a month of consultation period. Why is this one so shrouded in mystery? Is there a concern about the entirety of the bill in that sense, that there were things that he doesn't want seen in order to be assessed further?
You've got to assume that was behind it. They didn't want public opinion to build up against it. So the bill is going through the lower house today, and we're assuming it won't come to the upper until a couple of weeks' time. So there will be a little bit of time to review it, but there's been very little consultation. They've kept it all shrouded because we can only presume because they didn't want anyone to push. It's just not the way things are normally done, and there's no need for it now. It's basically over. They got the vaccination rates up over 90%. The crisis is over. It's time to go back to normal life. But Andrews doesn't want to do that. He wants to keep it rolling. He wants to keep his powers. Yeah, more lockdowns, more vaccine mandates. Why?
Well, Tim, the most bizarre part to me at present is that unvaccinated people at the moment in Victoria, they can actually go to a retail outlet, yet when the state hits 90% of double dosage, presumably it should be a safer state, according to how this all works, they'll then have those freedoms revoked. What have the discussions been around surrounding that decision, and does it have any correlation with science at all in that respect?
It's the science, yeah. What it really is the law, the current emergency. If someone takes that to court, it'll probably be ruled illegal because it's not proportionate. But under the new powers, by that date in November, they'll be able to do whatever they like. So the reason they've postponed it is not the science or anything else. It's just because under the new laws, it'll be legal, and under the current laws, it probably won't.
Right, okay. Well, look, Daniel Andrews has also recently stated that unvaccinated individuals will not be allowed to participate in regular Victorian life until potentially 2023. I mean, a full, more than a year from now. Presumably Victoria hits their 90% vaccination rate of the double dose by the end of this year. Why is that the decision then, if we're looking at potentially a year post double 90%?
Don't ask me. It's insane. It's utterly in. It makes no sense. Andrews is angry that people defying his will, and he's trying to force everyone into it. I can't tell you more than that. It does not make sense. There is no science behind it. It's just Andrews' iron will to power, trying to force it on everyone.
Has there been any consultation process with the likes of the Liberal Democrats or other parties, or is it just within the Andrews circle creating these things?
We certainly haven't been consulted about it, and that the three crossbenchers who supported it, the previous state of emergency extensions, were involved in negotiations, although some of them claim they weren't. Oh, they say they were and they weren't. We don't know what the picture is there, but certainly the opposition and the rest of the crossbench have had no consultation on it, and I don't think there's been very much consultation outside of the Parliament either. We had the Victorian Bar Association came out yesterday slamming it, and the fact that there's been no consultation. That their government said they were consulted them, but all they did was a 45-minute Teams meeting with them, which they discussed almost nothing about the bill. No consultation whatsoever.
And Tim, who were those three crossbenchers that were approached?
So we know on the last two states of emergency extensions, we had the Greens, Animal Justice, Andy Medic, and the Reason Party, Fiona. Those three MPs are the ones that were involved in, and they got a briefing on Monday from the government, and we don't know how much more briefing they had before that time or not. And it seems likely that they will be the ones that support it again. I think pretty much the rest of the crossbenchers come out against supporting this, but a couple of them haven't made public yet.
Now, just for those who might be tuning in a little late to this interview, can you, one, if you're willing to do so, declare what your vaccination status is and whether you believe people should be vaccinated? We know that you've certainly not agreed to provide the passport to enter Parliament, but where do you sit and where do the Liberal Democrats sit in terms of vaccinated or unvaccinated and yourself, of course?
So I'm vaccinated and I'm reasonably pro-vaccine. I've encouraged people to get a vaccine, but as a party, we support consent. We support choice. These things shouldn't be forced by the government. So people have the right to choose not to be vaccinated if they want. As a party, we always stand up for consent and for choice, and we'll never support compulsory vaccination, vaccine mandates, or any oppressive tactics.
And Tim, finally, the Australian Open debacle, this is an absolute mess. Obviously, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has suggested unvaccinated players will be allowed to compete. Andrews has now pushed back against that, suggesting that it's unfair to Victorians who have been jabbed. To me, it's not really an issue of fairness, though. How can the view be that I did it, so you have to do it too? Surely it has to be about health and not fairness, if it is indeed a vaccine which is designed to, I suppose, mitigate the risk of potential spread. What are your thoughts on it, and do you think that unvaccinated players should be able to play at the Australian Open?
Obviously they should, and again, it's all about Andrew's ego. He said that won't happen, and now he's going to try and make it not happen. I think the tennis authorities should push back and cancel Open again if Andrews is trying to chuck his weight around like this. It's nothing to do with tennis. It doesn't have to do with safety. It's about Andrew's ego.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time today. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience?
I don't know. This keeps going on. One day we'll get out of this. We're going to push back against this legislation the government's proposing. If we're going to block it or not. But at some point, people got to wake up and realise that the government's completely out of control. I'll say what I said to someone yesterday: never trust your governments. Don't give them the use it. We've seen that now for 18 months. Governments are not to be trusted.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that's Tim Quilty, MP for the Liberal Democrats, and if you missed any part of that conversation, you can catch the full interview later on our YouTube channel, Kalkine Media. I'm James Preston, signing off for now.